last year and then top 8'd another Open the following week, both with company decks. He was an Obzon company player in Modern. He was a Bant company player when he top 4'd the Invitational, and he's playing Counters company today.
Good person to have in your Modern seat on that deck.
Yeah, absolutely. So Frank Skarren winning the dial. He'll start on the play with Thraben Inspector. This is like just about a year ago that every deck was starting on turn 1 Thraben Inspectors. This card has been notably absent for the last 6 months.
And it has gotten better abstractly. As you see, there are 2 copies of Metallic Rebuke in Skarren's deck, a functional mana leak as long as you have that clue token in play.
I love that. We do see Mardu use it to turn on Enlicense Disintegration, but I'd much rather be using Metallic Rebuke.
Yes.
Second Thraben Inspector, another tap land here for Skarren.
And with 2 close and toe now, you can just cast Metallic Rebuke off of just 1 blue source now.
All right, and those of you watching, we're aware we're having the cards are a little difficult to see right now. We'll get to that after the match, but we'll call out some of the names for you during this game. For Mitchell Sachs, Attune with Ether is his play, getting 2 energy, finding a basic island.
Pretty standard starts.
So this looks like the tempo game we're hoping to see here, as now Glorybound Initiate, our card from Amonkhet, is going to be hit the field for Skarren. What I love about this, the strategy he has, is he gets to play a trio of creatures, and now can start sitting behind cards like Metallic Rebuke and Spell Queller.
What's really nice about the Glorybound Initiate is if you exert it, it becomes a 4/4, and it can attack right into things like this Rogue Refiner.
Absolutely. You see Frank's drawing here. He missed his 3rd land last turn, but it looks like he's found one.
Does have the requisite mana to cast a number of the counters in his deck if he has drawn them. Censor only costs 2. Metallic Rebuke is castable because of those clue tokens. He's not able to cast Spell Queller with the mana available, which is a wrench in the plan here. An Aetherworks Marvel on the following turn would be pretty problematic unless he's drawn one of those non-creature counter spells.
All right, so Glorybound Initiate will attack with Exert. It becomes a 4/4 lifelink. That's going to be big enough that Mitchell's not going to want to block it. And Frank will continue. He'll make that land drop that he picked up in Prairie Stream and actually cast Selfless Spirit. So here's a window for Mitchell Sachs to try to resolve, well, the namesake card, the Aetherworks Marvel.
And presumably, Skarren does not have a counter in hand. It's also just the case that he's not relevantly ahead on the battlefield anyway. So sometimes you just have to kind of cast into the Marvel and see what happens.
And Mitchell will actually cast Whirler Virtuoso. He may not have had... He had the land for Marvel. However, he didn't have it untapped. It was a copy of Lumbering Falls. So he makes the Virtuoso. Now, fortunately for Sachs, he has 7 energy, so he can make up to 2 Thopters this turn. That should be enough to keep Selfless Spirit at bay.
Yes. It's a significant cost of energy, but the deck is very capable of reloading for an inevitable Aetherworks Marvel. It's also the case that now that Skarren has hit his 3rd land drop, you have to be a bit concerned about a Spell Queller.
Yeah, Skarren just passing the turn with 3 mana up. Gets to remove the Exert from Glorybound Initiate, so that will be able to attack next turn.
If you were wondering, I'm sure you've seen plenty of Glorybound Initiate decks that feature some number of Always Watching for the combination with Exert.
That was something I was looking for.
These blue-whited decks have not yet adopted that. There's 0 copies in Skarren's list. If this deck becomes more popular, I would expect to see at least 1 copy show up. If you recall, when this deck was previously popular, it was a heck of a card in the mirror.
Yeah, and we're not yet at the point, I think, where Skarren's playing many mirror matches.
Right. He's expecting mostly Marvel decks and zombie decks on the other side of the table, where the Always Watching matters a bit less.
Here's Aetherworks Marvel. Skarren, he will go ahead and cast Metallic Rebuke for just a single blue, using those 2 clue tokens to improvise. And then he'll sack one of the clue tokens to draw a card. So great conversion here by Skarren as Mitchell just plays another tap land. Now Frank's deck, this is one of the ones that I would assume, Ryan, is... We didn't see this at the Pro Tour because it may not be that good against Mardu, but things have changed in the last couple weeks.
Yeah, these creatures don't size up terribly well against Marvel.
It's Mardu?
Yeah, right, against Mardu. There's also more uncertainty as to what was going to be on the other side of the table. These tempo decks, they generally have to be pretty in tune with the metagame. You want to make sure that you size up well against what the field is going to be.
Fourth land from Skarren. That clue helped him continue making land drops, and now it looks like he will go for Walking Ballista on 2. Some of the late game cards for Skarren, he's got this Ballista. He plays 4 copies of Gideon and 4 copies of Archangel Avacyn. Ballista will be made, and as it's Ballista on 2, this is a great answer to Whirler Virtuoso.
Yeah, the Ballista will be able to shoot down any potential Thopters as blockers. Skarren's also pretty happy if Sachs just wants to expend energy making Thopters, because that means he won't have enough energy to activate a potential Marvel on the following turn.
Skarren's going to swing the team. It's Selfless Spirit, both Thraben Inspectors, and once again with Exert, Glorybound Initiate. So it looks to me here that the Walking Ballista is ready to help finish off any of those creatures if Thraben Inspectors are blocked, but Mitchell's going to make a different play. He's going to double block Glorybound Initiate.
Yeah, the way this lines up, you have a 4/4 being blocked by 5 toughness of creatures. The Ballista can finish those off, and the Initiate couldn't even attack next turn anyway. I think Skarren's fine with this exchange.
4 damage to Mitchell, and what I do like about how Skarren, just some minor sequencing here, he ordered both the creatures so that Virtuoso died, then let all the combat damage happen, then used Ballista to finish off the Refiner. This way, Mitchell can't sneak any Thopters onto the board.
Or at least Skarren would know what was happening before he had to activate his Ballista.
Exactly. So at 7 energy, Mitchell does get an opportunity now to spin the Marvel. He'll play it for 4. Use 6 energy. Here we go. Top 6 cards. What can Mitchell do?
Be a nice spot for Chandra.
He's got in his main deck his big hits, 3 Chandra Flamecallers and 4 copies of Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger.
That card's also just usually good.
We see there's Ulamog in the top 6. No Chandra. He probably would have preferred Chandra here.
Yeah, being able to actually clean up the board, though the Selfless Spirit actually probably makes it so Ulamog is better.
Oh, you're right. There's the Spirit. So Indestructible doesn't help there. Now Mitchell's down to 9. 1 Ulamog might not actually be enough here.
That does sometimes happen, which is kind of funny.
Consulting here with teammates. What to exile?
And Sachs is down to 9. When your life total is that low,
Right.
creatures with evasion, Walking Ballista with its reach, these are both very problematic problems.
Mitchell will target Walking Ballista and Selfless Spirit with the trigger. So Selfless Spirit will sacrifice to make Frank's creatures indestructible. Ballista will send 1 damage upstairs. Mitchell's down to 8. Frank's last remaining creatures, just a pair of Thraben Inspectors. But on Mitchell's side, he's made the 6th land drop, and since Selfless Spirit is off the table, a Chandra off the top could seal this for him.
And just facing down 2 Thraben Inspectors, he's not under too much duress.
Back over to Skarren, draws a copy of Archangel Avacyn. Don't know if he has the 5th land to cast her just yet. Looks like he does not. Yeah, he just has to sacrifice the clue. Avacyn would have been a great answer to something like Chandra Flamecaller.
And at 28, Skarren, technically, you won't take lethal damage from the Ulamog until 3 swings, but you get milled for that much anyway in that kind of time.
Ulamog eats your library. So Frank's whole turn there was to crack his 2nd clue token, and then he played tapped an Irrigated Farmland.
Yeah, 3 copies of Irrigated Farmland in Skarren's main deck. Pretty unfortunate to have as your 5th land drop.
Ulamog will attack and exile 20 cards. Irrigated Farmland is the blue-white dual land with cycling. Frank's deck seems like the type of deck that really benefits from having that kind of versatility in its lands.
Well, that was always true about the previous iterations of the blue-white tempo deck, that when they drew the 6th and 7th land, it was very bad news.
Right.
Being able to cycle those lands is very helpful. Them entering the battlefield tapped, particularly in this turn where he wants that mana, is pretty unfortunate. If it came off the clue token, that's whatever. But if he naturally drew it, it wouldn't have been good.
So our first game result in over on the modern tables, Andrew Maine, the company player with Counters Company, takes game 1 over team captain Jim Davis. So 20 cards go away, 10 damage. And for Mitchell, here's Whirler Virtuoso. That'll bring him up to 4 energy. Now, he's choosing to play that over Chandra. And now we see why. Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot brings him up to 7 energies, valuing that Marvel spin.
Yeah.
And
He also doesn't need to clean up 2 Thraben Inspectors with any kind of expediency.
yeah, gains him life as well. He's up to 11 thanks to the Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot. This is a secure place for Mitchell to play from.
And it looks like his 7th land entered the battlefield tapped. Playing into Censor in this spot would not be ideal.
I'll go back to Frank. Yeah. So Frank Skarren, I still had a healthy 18. Glorybound Initiate gained him a lot of life here. However, as you mentioned, it looks like his library will get exiled before the life total.
Right. You know, even you almost never get dealt lethal damage by a Ulamog. He's got a couple of chump blockers line up. It's the ability to eat your library. Exactly. That's what does it.
I got exactly, the last Modern tournament I played, I got exactly killed by an Ulamog. It's 13. He hit me with the Ulamog and then played Ugin and plussed it. It was very rude. It's like, wow, the exact damage.
Yeah, Tron definitely has to get those chip shots in.
Made me no, and the worst part was early on in the game. I had been shocking off my dual lands just for bluff value because it's like Tron doesn't deal damage. Maybe I'll make him think I have something I don't. And then when he exacts me, it's like, well, boy, was I punished.
Yeah, see that happen a lot. Rookie mistake.
All the time.
Rookie mistake.
Frank Skarren does have a copy of Stasis Snare there in his hand, but it's gonna go. He's casting it on Ulamog, and then just has to say go. Not a great spot here for Frank, and Mitchell will go back to the Marvel.
There's the Marvel activation, and then there's just the Chandra in Mitchell's hand.
Yeah. And all this one finds is a Glimmer of Genius.
I'd be pretty content to spin Marvel and find Glimmer every turn.
Yeah. And that is what Mitchell will cast. Up to 3 energy. So right now, it's feeling like Team Marvel is still going to go ahead and get that first game.
Yeah, he's going to kind of pull ahead on card advantage. You know, Glimmer of Genius will allow him to filter his draws. He already has a Chandra that he's able to cast just in the following turn. Wouldn't be countered by Censored now. He'll be on tapping with the 7 mana, so that's not an issue. And he's also just approaching the turn where he gets to 10 mana and is able to just start casting Ulamogs. Skarren actually has to close the game, and that Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot's making it a lot harder than it was a couple turns ago. There was a window where Sachs was at 8, and Archangel Avacyn could potentially flash in, squeak in those last points of damage. But now he's at 11, a functional 14. It looks like Sachs will be able to close this one.
Right, and I mean, if he's that far ahead, actually just doing things like marveling into more Puzzle Knots.
Yeah.
Is very strong. See Mitchell up to 14 life, gets back up to 6 energy or 7 energy for his Marvel. He'll spin it again.
I'd be pretty happy just casting Chandra, but Mitchell has bigger aspirations.
Well, he did find an Ulamog on the Marvel, so I do like that. And now he's going to go for Frank's lands. Frank will cycle Censor. And loses the 2 lands. Giving a bit of information away there, I guess it's probable that Mitchell just assumes Censors in Frank's deck. Now he doesn't have to guess, though.
Whether intentional or not, you know, Skarren does not know that Mitchell has a Chandra, but on the previous turn he did not commit a Chandra when he had 6 mana.
Right.
It's also a good chance that Mitchell, if he's savvy keeping up a Magic Online, he's at least seen a similar list to what Skarren is playing. Declaration
in Stone from Frank Skarren on the Ulamog. So his deck's actually, between Stasis Snare and Declaration, is capable of dealing with these Eldrazi's. Now, I'm not sure that's going to lead into a game win for him here. We'll have to see on that. He does swing 2, getting Mitchell down to 12. If this is the plan Mitchell wants to be on, is to cast Glimmer of Genius, I guess he could start trying to end step the Ulamogs. That would have played around Declaration in Stone.
Yeah, that is an option. He's already seen a Stasis Snare, so that means that there's fewer of those available.
He's main phasing them right now, though, to take care of Frank's mana. It's a more aggressive line.
Yeah, the double Stone Rain was really nice there. Now he has a hand with multiple Chandras. I mean, he's so far ahead that this is one of those games where worrying about that precise sequencing can sometimes cause you more problems than it's worth.
Sure.
He's got a long day of Magic ahead of him. He's looking to play, 5 more Swiss rounds and hopefully 3 more after that.
Yeah, and these teams currently in a 4-way tie, one of the 4 teams at 8-1. A win to start the day puts them in a strong position. We were saying 3-3 from either of these teams would likely be good enough to make it into the top 8. Starting that on a win is a really comfortable place to play the tournament from.
Yep.
Chandra Flamecaller for Mitchell Sachs. And Frank does not have the mana for Metallic Rebuke. And the Planeswalker will hit the board. 2 elementals join the Virtuoso. It's a swing for 8. That's half of Frank's life total.
Yeah, this threatens to close the game in very short order. On the following turn, with the backup Chandra, he can make as many as 4 3/1 elementals.
Yeah, card here from Frank. It is finally his 5th land for the Archangel Avacyn, but may have come too late here.
It can technically buy Skarren some time, but the thing is, he's just tapping all of his lands to cast these spells that don't even size up entirely to the quality of Sachs spells. And Sachs is still just has Aetherworks Marvel on the battlefield.
Yeah, well, what Frank seems to be thinking about is there any sort of bad composition in hand or misplay that Mitchell could make which would allow Frank to, say, sneak in that remaining 12 damage? He'll swing 1 Thraben Inspector at Chandra, putting her down to 4.
The plan here seems to be that Skarren wants to commit Avacyn and hopefully be able to kill the Chandra on the following turn, but Sachs' hand is very well stocked. He has a 2nd Chandra and actually a Harnessed Lightning for the Avacyn.
Sachs, you can use that clue on end step. Over on the legacy tables, Ben Friedman on blue-black control. It's like we have a control mirror here between Baker and Friedman. Baker, the Sultai version, so going for cards like Leovold, whereas Ben's just more removal, more card draw. Ben takes the first game. Chandra makes elementals for Mitchell. Looks like 2nd Chandra might make more elementals. But he has Negate, Harnessed Lightning.
Yeah, he's got protection for all kinds of stuff here.
Yeah, 2nd Chandra is going to be the play. 2 more elementals. 5 attackers here. Frank only representing 2 blockers at the moment. So as long as 3 get through, that is 8 damage. The 3 smallest creatures are a 2 and a 3 and a 3. That looks to me like it adds up.
That checks out.
And checks out too. Frank will scoop up the cards. So it is Mitchell Sachs on Teamer Marvel winning game 1 here.
Yeah, so Skarren's deck, the idea is to go under, and he was able to counter the first Aetherworks Marvel. Though once the second one hit the battlefield, he was really never able to recover from that point. As we go to the sideboards, on Mitchell Sachs' side, we have 3 Tireless Tracker, 3 Sweltering Suns, 2 Negate, 2 Manglehorn, 2 Confiscation Coup, a Sphinx of the Final Word, a Dispel, and a Magma Spray. The Sweltering Sun seems solid enough. They can deal with Glorybound Initiate, some Thraben Inspector, a Spell Queller that's hanging out in the battlefield. It seems well enough positioned here. There's some argument for Sphinx of the Final Word if you expect your opponent to have a good amount of counter spells. That's largely what the card does, so that's fine. Magma Spray is a little bit aggressive as it doesn't kill Spell Queller. I probably wouldn't go towards that one, but the heavier removal spells I do like.
Magma Spray is interesting, right? So it does kill Glorybound Initiate, which would be very nice. It, in a sense, kills Selfless Spirit, and then it forces Frank to sacrifice it.
I suppose the existence of Selfless Spirit does make the Magma Spray considerably more relevant if he wants to make these Sweltering Suns count.
Yeah, but you're right that outside of those 2 cards, there aren't very many things it interacts with. A lot of those cards that Mitchell didn't see, Avacyn and Gideon, for example, Frank's heavy hitters, he's got to assume that they're there.
Right. Yeah, Frank's not just playing this blue-white deck full of mopey creatures and minimal interaction. As we go over to Skarren's side, he has 3 Fumigate, 2 Sky Sovereigns, 2 Negates, an Eldrazi Sky Spawner, a Declaration of Stone, an Irrigated Farmland, a Descend Upon the Symbol, a Cast Out, a Dispel, a Metallic Rebuke, and a Jace Unraveler of Secrets. More counter spells, specifically the Metallic Rebuke to deal with Aetherworks Marvel on the way down. That makes a lot of sense. I imagine the Cast Out will be coming in both as an answer to a Resolved Marvel or an Ulamog or a Chandra in a pinch.
Yeah, by and large, this matchup, it seems like Frank just needs to avoid some of that awkwardness in game 1 where he didn't get onto the board quickly.
Yeah.
The card, Whirler Virtuoso, it seems like it might be Mitchell's most important card here.
Yeah, and that's why these Metallic Rebukes are particularly powerful, and the 2 Negates will certainly be coming in, but they don't solve all of the problems.
All right, so you guys joining us, we are here at our second team event of the season. Now, we still have a few more opens before we get to our Season 1 Invitational. This weekend, we are in Louisville, so it's casting the team event. Next weekend, we'll be traveling over to Baltimore, where the tour will play some Modern. 2 weeks later, we'll be in Charlotte in the same format before we reach the Season 1 Invitational. That is a mixed format of Modern and Standard, so you still have a couple chances to win an open, come out and qualify for that on the SCG Tour. Now, we're also winding down on the number of chances you have to get some of these playmats for the season. We have exclusive art playmats from their formats. So for Standard, Opens, and Classics, we're giving away a copy of the Aether Hub playmat. That's the land from Kaladesh. Really has been a player in Standard since this has been printed.
Yeah, this land's very powerful. It really embarrasses Tendo Icebridge.
Yeah. For Modern ones, we have Aether Vial. It is going to be the Kaladesh Masterpiece Series playmat, giving away Modern, Classics, and Opens. And for Legacy, it is the Eternal Masters edition of Gamble. So all 3 playmats are available. They're free with entry to any Season 1 Open or Classic. Like I said, we have 2 more before our Invitational.
Aether Vial, the upgraded version of Ice Cauldron, and Gamble, the red version of Good Cards.
It was the red tutor, right? So we had, right, it was like Enlightened Tutor, Worldly Tutor, Mystical Tutor, Vampiric Tutor, and then the red one was Gamble.
Gamble came later than those cards.
Right.
Those cards are from Visions. And
Are all 4 of those
Gamble's
from Visions?
Urza's Saga. Well, Vampiric Tutor's from Visions, Enlightened Tutor's from Mirage, Worldly Tutor's from Mirage, Mystical Tutor's from Mirage. But this is all well before Urza's Saga.
I sometimes have heard of it referred to as completing the cycle. You know, when they first gave everybody all colors a 1-mana tutor except for red. And they're like, people are like, hey, why doesn't red get a tutor? And they're like, all right, this is what the red tutor
looks like. When
looks
we're designing them in Mirage, like, should we do a red one? What's the red one going to find?
Right. So, because they'd already done all the card types, and they're like, well, I kind of do like it flavorfully. It's a very, well, this is what the red tutor is. It's just, it's kind of dumb.
Search your library for a card named Ironclaw Orcs. Put it right on top.
It's like Goblin Tutor. Yeah, you can find anything with a fail rate.
Goblin Tutor is actually much more powerful than you're giving it credit for. Goblin Matron would be Goblin Tutor.
Well, that card's just good.
That card's quite powerful.
I would like it if Goblin Matron found you any Goblin.
No, strike that. Goblin Recruiter is Goblin Tutor, and that card is actually not Legacy legal because it's so messed up.
Goblin Matron more flavorful. Found your deck, search your deck for a Goblin, reveal it, put it in your hand, then discard a card at random. It's just Goblins are only kind of good at their job. Frank Skarren taking a mulligan to 6 here. You could put some stats on it then. You could make it a 2/2. I'm just still making the card unplayable.
That's what matters. What if it was a 2/2?
Can't block. I did like the Ironclaw Orcs theme, whereas these were creatures. Well, they're bullies, right? This 2/2 is like, I only fight 1/1s.
I mean, you don't want to fight a fight that you're going to lose.
Right. No, it's very sensible. Frank going back to the deck for a 5-card hand here.
Figures that it's going to take Jim a while to finish, so we may as well pile shuffle.
Yeah, it does have to talk with Jim here. Remember, if both Jim and Frank lose their games here, that is going to be the round, regardless of what happens over in Legacy.
And Dredge versus Counters Company, I imagine that's a pretty rough bout for the Dredge deck.
Well, yeah, Dredge is powerful, but not particularly interactive. One thing we saw with the Counters Company deck, their Goldfish turn can be very fast if you don't interact with them. I assume it's actually faster than Dredge.
The ability to Dark Blast Vizier of Remedies is pretty significant.
Yeah, that's actually really strong.
But the deck does have a lot else going on. You can Dark Blast Viscera Seer as well, so that card is quite powerful in the matchup.
Yeah, and to that end, Jim Davis has taken the first sideboarded game, so it is 1-1. Right, once Dredge becomes more interactive, he's got some plans, but Jim losing game 1 is not too surprising here.
Right.
Skarren keeping a 5. Looks like it's not a great one, though. You can kind of see on his face, he's a look of, well, I don't think this will win, but I don't know if 4-card hand's any better.
It's usually the case where your 5-card hands, you got to look at what 1 or 2 things you're missing. How likely are you to hit them in time? It's rare that if you have a 5-card hand that's just functional, congratulations, you know, that's usually not the case.
Well, Frank has Scry to the top, so he starts on Port Town Revealing Island. So he has lands to play with, well, at least 2. And a Lumbering Falls for Mitchell Sachs.
And it looks like mana's not the choking point.
Yeah, Prairie Stream played by Frank, so he will make it to land 3. Some good news, though, for the Gurus over in Legacy. 2-0. Ben Friedman takes both games, and with that, the match. So while things may look rough for Frank, they may not need his win this round. If Jim Davis can take game 3, that'll be enough. Glorybound Initiate is made by Frank. Now, it's on the 3rd turn here, and it gets hit by Harnessed Lightning. So far, Frank is not able to push any advantage.
At the very least, Sachs won't be able to resolve an Aetherworks Marvel on this turn. So that's a little bit of good news for Skarren.
Aether Hub into Rogue Refiner for Mitchell. Brings him up to 5 energy and nets him a card. You see in his hand a pair of Aetherworks Marvels.
These are the kinds of games where Rogue Refiner can maybe actually just win the game without much help.
Yeah, I mean, Frank is going to do a good job of keeping these Marvels under control. However, he doesn't own the board right now.
Rogue Refiner is a pretty pushed card in its own right. 3 mana 3/2 that replaces itself. That's quite powerful.
Right, it's a 3 mana 3/2 that draws a card, which is already very good. And in decks like Marvel decks, 2 energy, it's almost like this is drawing 1.5 cards or something like that.
Right.
If you think 6 energy is a Marvel activation, well, 2 energy isn't nothing. It's most of a Thopter. We see now Whirler Virtuoso is the play for Mitchell.
Yeah, 1/3 of a Marvel spin, 2/3 of a Thopter. Pretty good conversion.
Metallic Rebuke will hit the Whirler Virtuoso. Mitchell attacks and plays a land. Now, Mitchell did get Frank to counter something that wasn't Marvel. You see Frank continues to have to pass.
Yeah, when you're ahead on cards, and particularly because Sachs is on the draw, he's already starting up the game that card anyway. And his deck is so heavy on Haymakers, he can just continue to cast good spells up and down the curve.
Right.
And that's going to tax Skarren. Meanwhile, he's still pressuring Skarren with this Rogue Refiner. He's just ahead on top of that.
Negate hits the Aetherworks Marvel from Mitchell. If you look at Mitchell's hand as he attunes here for land 6, he's got another Marvel. He actually has Chandra Flamecaller in the 6th land in hand, so he's forcing Frank to have counterspells every turn.
And I imagine that Sachs will play around a potential Censor if the mana is available for that.
Yeah, that makes sense. 4th land by Frank, and he has to pass it. Now, if Frank has to have a counterspell every turn, I guess the only way he can get on the board here is with a card like Spell Queller.
Yep. And even that's outsized in terms of trading damage by the Rogue Refiner. It connects for 3, and then if they end up in combat, they just trade. So even Spell Queller is not terribly powerful here.
Mitchell Sachs in hand, he plays land 6. He has Marvel, Virtuoso, and Chandra. He'll go for Aetherworks Marvel, and this time it resolves. Mitchell immediately spins for the top 6.
Yeah, this is some pretty bad news. If this finds a Chandra here, too, he can apply a lot of pressure on this turn.
It is Chandra.
It's always the case that an Ulamog is really good, and if he hit that, he could take Skarren off of both of his white mana sources.
So Chandra Flamecaller enters the battlefield through the Aetherworks Marvel. Will it be countered? It looks like the answer is no. So Chandra ticks up. A pair of 3/1s enter the battlefield. This swing should be for 9. It's looking like Mitchell is going to take this one 2-0.
Yeah. Skarren's deck doesn't really have swingy cards. There's really not much in standard that you can do from this spot to catch up.
Well, right, because the issue is that Mitchell not only are, one, his cards mythic rares and great. So pound for pound, they're good. He's playing 2 of them a turn, 1 from hand, 1 from Marvel. And that's just hard to come back from.
And Skarren just stasis snared Rogue Refiner.
Well,
that doesn't really feel particularly bad if you're Mitchell.
Yeah, he went to 8 from the Elementals. He didn't want to go down to 5. Mitchell cycles a land. See, he's got Puzzle Knot, Attune, another Chandra.
And if he's concerned about the card Skarren has being Avacyn, he can just activate Chandra, cast other Chandra, and that would win through that on this turn.
Chandra makes a pair of 3/1s. He's just going to attack with them. Here is Archangel Avacyn. She will block an elemental, so Frank drops to 5. And because one of those was blocked, Mitchell could get an energy off the blocked one. The other one, Exiles, had a turn. That one will not give him an energy.
And an Attune with Ether and a Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot among Sachs leftovers.
Yeah, a lot more energy to use that Marvel again if he wants to. With Frank at 5, it looks like Mitchell's just figuring out the best way to do this. He can make a lot of energy. He can play and crack Puzzle Knot and cast Attune with his mana.
It's like Whirler Virtuoso, Chandra, the last cards.
Yep, those are the last 2. So plenty of energy makers.
He could cast all of the non-Chandra spells on this turn, and Skarren's tapped out. That'd make it pretty easy to come in for lethal on the following turn.
So here's Attune. Goes up to 5 energy.
And this Attune actually means that he'll have a 7 mana on the following turn, so if he needs to cast second Chandra, it couldn't even be censored.
Whirler Virtuoso adding 3 up to 8 energy for Mitchell here. And now Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot, so he's up to 11 energy.
And Skarren drawing up to his second card in hand. Remember, he was on a mold of 5 this game, but yeah, Sachs' spell quality has really just been higher. And we saw in the early game, Skarren had no difficulty hitting his land drops, so he did think about this hand. So that must have been it. There just wasn't that many spells, which does happen when you're down on cards.
Yeah, second Chandra. So, Glorybound Initiate from Frank. After Chandra is hit down to 2.
That will be able to trade with an elemental token.
Yeah.
And that is kind of the downside of these blue-white tempo decks, is they're good at playing from ahead. They have a lot of difficulty from behind.
Yeah, and that's frequently true of, your Flash, Tempo, Delver, just blue attacking decks frequently are this way. Cards like Unsummon, as in an aggressive deck, or effects that bounce or do things like that, are really powerful. Spell Queller, very powerful when you're ahead or even. Not very good when you're behind.
And even if you're talking about, well, Frank Mulligan, this will happen, but when you look at the deck on the other side of the table,
he can mulligan
Marvel
and do
can
it.
mulligan to 5 and still hit you with a turn 4 Ulamog.
Yeah, we see here Chandra's going to go ahead and make a pair of elementals. Lumbering Falls will activate. Mitchell making a ton of Thopters. Here's going to be the whole team swinging. Those 2, we have Thopters, Elementals, Lumbering Falls. That's going to be the game. and the match. So it is now goes to the team captains here, Andrew Maine and Jim Davis. In Modern, they are in game 3. We're going to bring you over to that one. It's Counters Company and Dredge. 2 zeros going opposite ways here in Standard and Mod and Legacy. So, you know, Frank's deck was built to kind of slay that matchup. It still looks like there could be, you know, probably still a good matchup for him, but still losable.
It's kind of the thing where it's a good matchup. It doesn't look like it in the games that it loses.
Right.
I imagine almost none of the games are actually close. You know, you have your percentage based on raw aggregate data, and it's like I win, you know, 55, 60%, but it's like the games I win by a lot.
The ones
and the games I lose by a lot.
Yeah, certainly. And especially with a deck like Team or Marvel with so many high-powered cards in the deck, it gets its, you know, 40% in most matchups just because when your cards are that good, it's hard to, they will win games.
Keeping up on card quality is going to be very difficult.
All right, we're going to get you our Modern match. This is Jim Davis and Andrew Maine. So Dredge on Jim Davis' side, and Dredge is exactly what he is doing. Looking at that, that is the graveyard laid out there. It's got a Bloodghast Narcomoeba in play, 16 life for Jim Davis. On Andrew Maine's side, it looks like we have a Chord of Calling being convoked here. He's just got Kitchen Finks in play, however.
And courting for Birds of Paradise here. Presumably a Collected Company in hand that he's needing the mana to cast.
Yeah, and it looks like now some prized amalgams coming out of the yard from Jim. So those were triggered this turn. What's neat about these Counters Company decks is there's still some discussion as to what the lists are going to look like. Looks like Andrew Maine is playing a Walking Ballista Kill. He does have 3 Viscera Seers in his list, so he's heavier on combo, on the traditional Abzan combo. So Andrew's going to get to untap. That Birds of Paradise is an extra mana source. Andrew Maine's still at 20, but Jim's deck's engine has started going. He doesn't appear to have a Dark Blast yet. So Jim's attack down to 14. There is, however, a Conflagrate in Jim's graveyard along with Life from the Loam. So a lot of times against these creature decks, that is a strategy that Jim goes for in the late game.
Yep, you dredge your Life from the Loam, get a lot of lands into your graveyard, put them in your hand, suddenly you have a lot of cards in hand, you can Conflagrate for a large number.
And that's exactly what Jim's doing here. You see he dredges Life from the Loam for the turn. He could, if he wanted to, this turn. His last card's Cathartic Reunion. I suppose he could just dredge a lot with Cathartic Reunion. Get most of his deck into the graveyard.
Well, it looks like it's just Life from Loam and Cathartic Reunion. He doesn't have a third card to discard at this point in time. He could Loam for 4th land, make the land drop, and then discard one of the other lands.
Yeah, he could Loam back 3 lands, play 1, fetch with that 1, discard the other 2 to Reunion.
Right.
He's going to start by attacking Andrew Maine down to 9. Jim having 9 power in play. Maine was at 18. But it's unclear whether or not Jim actually wants to set up a Reunion when he could just get back lands and try to go for Lethal Conflagrate next turn.
Yeah.
So Life from the Loam's back. Loam's back 3 cards.
Yeah, so this actually, he needs to have the extra land drop to Conflagrate anyway.
Right.
If he's going to Loam on the same turn.
So he's going to Loam back the lands and immediately flashes back the 2nd copy of Conflagrate. Has his 3 cards in hand. See how many of them he wants to discard.
Yeah, Collected Company certainly on Jim's radar here.
You know, and that just has to be it, right? The courting for Birds of Paradise doesn't make much sense. And then passing with 4 mana up if Maine does not have Collected Company here.
Right.
So he's going to cast Conflagrate. Starts to discuss with teammate Ben Friedman. What sort of combination of End-Step Company, untap, do something else could Maine have? If you haven't seen the Counters Company deck, it's actually, if the first company here hits Devoted Druid, it's not that hard for Andrew to just win.
Right.
And Jim doesn't have instant speed interaction. He's got to just dodge that. Looks like he went for 3. So here is Andrew Maine casting Collected Company.
And it looks like Collected Company's got a mix of goodies. There's an Eternal Witness, Kitchen Finks, Viscera Seer. Kitchen Finks Viscera Seer gets him the better part of a combo.
Yeah. So this Conflagrate is still on the stack right now. That one makes sense from Andrew Maine. Looks like it's likely doing 1, 1, and 1. Jim discarded his whole hand. So Maine looks at his cards. He has, as you mentioned, Viscera Seer, also Eternal Witness, Kitchen Finks, and Duskwatch Recruiter.
Certainly does not have the time or the mana to mess around with Duskwatch Recruiter. That one is among the lands as he's looking at them.
Right. Duskwatch Recruiter in these decks, it's good with when you have the combo in play, it represents the win.
Right.
Because he doesn't have Devoted Druid, that doesn't work. Now, the Viscera Seer Kitchen Finks is interesting. That's most of his combo. If he just finds Anafenza, it's a one of. However, he could Witness back the Collected Company, except he doesn't have the mana. He could Witness back his Court of Calling.
Yeah, with the birds going down, you would need to have a land drop to be able to cast the company again.
Looking at, if he goes Witness Viscera Seer and gets back Court of Calling, can he set up a combo there?
Witness Seer, no Finks in play.
Oh yeah, the Finks in play is about to die, isn't it?
Right.
Okay. He goes for Eternal Witness Kitchen Finks on the Collected Company, so that'll bring him up to 11.
Well, no, it's for Court of Calling. This way, if he draws either combo piece, he'll be able to chord into the other. So if he finds Viscera Seer, he can find Vizier of Remedies, or vice versa.
So gets Chord into his hand, draws Misty Rainforest. His hand is another Eternal Witness, a Court of Calling. So Misty Rainforest is the play. Yeah. Chord Witness Walking Ballista is his hand.
It's a good mix of cards, but I think he's too choked on mana to convert it.
So he maybe can't win this turn, but can he buy himself another turn? Jim used his last Conflagrate. He only has 9 power in play.
Jim can Conflagrate for 3 on the following turn by dredging Loam, or he doesn't have any Conflagrates
He doesn't
anymore.
have one in the
so
yard.
He had to flip it over by dredging the Loam.
Right. Now he does have a Stinkweed Imp. This could happen, but yeah, if Andrew might be able just to lay up for the next turn. And in that case, he does have, he gets 4 more mana.
Well,
he gets
with
an
Eternal
untap.
Witness plus Court of Calling, that's enough material to Court of Calling twice. He has 1/3 of his combo.
Yeah, each Court of Calling is another potential combo piece.
Yeah,
He'll just say go.
Yeah, the biggest concern involves Jim dredging into specific cards.
And passing here is a show of strength from Andrew Maine.
Well, he's not going to win by chipping in.
Yeah, I mean, no, not casting Witness or Ballista.
Sure.
So Chord for 3 is left up by Maine. Both players know there's a chord in Maine's hand. Jim now deciding what to dredge. He'd love to find Dark Blast in his yard, but if he finds it this turn, he actually can't do much with it. He can't dredge it until the next turn.
If he dredges over it, he still has a Faithless Looting in his graveyard.
Okay.
He could flash that back and then dredge back the Dark Blast. He'd have to discard it, however. So it would have to be like with Life from the Loam, and then he doesn't have enough mana to actually execute this. If he just draws naturally and flashes back.
Yeah, if he draws naturally and flashes back Faithless Looting, he could end up with a Dark Blast in his hand.
It's fine if he dredges as well.
He's discussing here with teammate Ben Friedman. Yeah, there's no reason, drawing naturally. He draws or dredges, gets a card in his hand, flashes back Faithless Looting.
Yeah.
Goes up to 3, down to 1.
And for some reason, I was thinking that when you dredge, it just hangs out in your graveyard.
You just mill instead of drawing.
That'd be a much worse mechanic.
So 1 Dark Blast is a fine amount of interaction. Is that even enough? I guess it hits Vizier of Remedies and Viscera Seer, so there's a lot to like about it.
Mm-hmm. It can break up a number of combo setups.
I actually should note here, I need to apologize to you guys. Jim did not register Dark Blast this weekend.
It's an interesting choice.
Okay, so that actually changes things a lot. Yeah. His
Yes.
sideboard is Abrupt Decays, Maelstrom Pulses, Collective Brutalities, Thought Seizes, Lightning Axes, Nod of the Bone, Ghost Quarter, Bazooka Bog, Ancient Grudge, Vengeful Pharaoh. There's no way to deal with X1s.
Yeah, the Maelstrom Pulse, they're a little out of the ordinary for the Dredge sideboard.
But how about this? He dredged a life from the loam for the turn, and then flipped over another Conflagrate.
So if he wants it, he has the option to Conflagrate for 3 on this turn.
So now he's just going to attack everything. And there's some pressure here, because now that the Conflagrate is flipped, Andrew Maine actually has to block some of this damage.
He won't miss the Eternal Witness if he blocks that away.
Right. When the Witness got back Court of Calling, the job was already done.
Right.
Now, if Maine blocks with Kitchen Finks, and Kitchen Finks has to persist back, that can muck up some of the Viscera Seer combos, right?
Yeah, that forces you to find a way to get the Kitchen Finks back up to a 3-2.
Yeah. I guess if you're going for Anafenza Kintree Spirit, that's possible. You can just bolster onto it.
Right.
So Finks is going to trade with Prized Amalgam. Looks like 6 damage will come across. Maine's going to make a play here before... Well, actually, he doesn't have to make a play before Finks dies if he goes this way. It'll come back as a 2-1.
Right. He doesn't lose any mana on his Court of Calling.
And I think that's what Maine's trying to do. He wants to be able to end step that Court of Calling so that whatever he gets cannot be hit by Conflagrate. So this is really smart. Goes down to 5 on the attack. Finks will persist back, putting Andrew to 7.
Yeah, then he can Cord for Anafenza on end step. On his turn, Eternal Witness for Cord for Viscera Seer.
Wow, all right. So Maine is at 7 now. Out of range of this Conflagrate, Jim is going to cast Life from the Loam for 3 lands. But this might be Jim's last turn. Andrew has Cord with Witness. And what to do here? Jim's debating, does he shoot these lands at the creatures? I guess removing Andrew's creatures makes his Court of Callings, his Chords of Calling worse. The next one, the one he gets right, because next turn...
Yeah, then there's fewer material to work with.
Fewer things, yeah. At some point, Jim needs to make sure he wins. You know, if he continues to make these plays where he casts Conflagrates at Andrew's creatures, Andrew keeps getting more turns.
It's tough, though. I mean, it's kind of up to Maine and how he blocks whether or not Jim is actually able to win. You know, the Conflagrate can't be lethal on this turn, and he needs to make sure that Maine does not do the infinite life combo. Yeah, so he really needs to take care of that Kitchen Finks on this turn.
Seal Spectacular. Your seedings for net construction have been posted by the Black Gathering Point flag on purple paper.
So they know about the Court of Calling that Maine is returning. Davis, I don't believe, knows about the Eternal Witness in hand, however.
Conflagrate. Discard, cast by Davis. Looks like it's going to be... Okay, they're going to go 1 at the Eternal Witness and 1 at their own Bloodghast. This is a neat play that Jim's doing so that he can play the land in his hand, bring back the Bloodghast, which will in turn bring back 2 copies of Prized Amalgam.
Yep. Yeah, after the Kitchen Finks traded away with 1, he had 1 that was already in the graveyard. This allows him to apply way more pressure to Maine's life total on the following turn.
All right. And Andrew's going to Court of Calling here for 2. Go fetches down to 6 to do it. And you can tell with the speed that Andrew Maine is playing, he's got something in mind. It's going to be Devoted Druid. All right.
So he still has the other Eternal Witness in hand. He gets back Cord, and then he needs a land drop to be able to Cord for 2 to find Vizier. But if he finds that, then he can Ballista for lethal. So
the judge has issued a slow play warning to Jim Davis's team, which does mean if this goes to turns, it'll go to 7 additional turns instead of 4. 5, but you're absolutely right. So he gets Devoted Druid, and we'll walk you through the combo here. Andrew Maine plays Eternal Witness, gets back Court of Calling. He's going to tap all 5 of his creatures to Court of Calling for 2. 5 lands plus creatures, so he goes and gets Vizier of Remedies. Vizier of Remedies means that when Devoted Druid untaps, it doesn't get a -1/-1 counter to do it, so it can just kind of tap for as much green as it wants. At that point, he makes as much green mana as he wants, and that Walking Ballista becomes a pretty nice card.
Yeah. Actually didn't need the land because the Devoted Druid gets a free roll on tapping
can tap
itself.
twice, yeah. And there is the combo. It's going to be Andrew Maine in Modern leading his team to victory. So for Baker, Maine, and Sachs, they win it with the Modern and Standard, and they stay at X and 1, getting a first win